This presentation is on artificial neural networks. It was put together by Ryan Landis, Josiah Ball, and me, Paula Hare. We chose to focus our presentation on Spaun. Spaun is the world's largest simulation of a functioning brain. What that stands for is Semantic Pointer Architecture Unified Network. It includes a robotic arm that draws and an eye that can see. It was created by a team of neuroscientists at Waterloo University in Canada. Here you see a screen capture from a simulation of Spaun in action. It shows the input image on the right, and the output is drawn on the surface below Spaun's arm. Neuron activity is approximately mapped to relevant cortical areas and shown in color. Red is an area of high activity, and blue is low. Some key features of Spaun is that it can remember and put numbers into a list, then it can write them back down. It also captures key aspects of perception, cognition, and behavior. It has definitely raised the bar on models of the brain, because it functions just as a human brain would. This includes the voltages generated in the cells and the signals zipping down the brain. Essentially, it can mimic the firing down an axon. Humans have about 100 billion neurons in their brains. This is a lot compared to Spaun's 2.5 million. But 2.5 million is still an amazing number for a simulation of a brain. These neurons are organized into subsystems to resemble the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, the thalamus, and other cognitive machinery found in a human brain. The artificial neurons extract visual data and make sense of the patterns. It sends the visual information to different parts of the brain based on the task it needs to carry out. It can memorize numbers one moment and then memorize a list the next. It doesn't have trouble shifting from task to task. Here is a short demo of what Spaun can do.
My colleagues and I at the University of Waterloo have built a large-scale model of a functioning brain called Spaun. The model receives its only input as a 28 by 28 pixel image and controls a simulated arm. In this video, we see both the activity of the various brain areas and decodings of the neural representations in those areas. The first task is a recognition task. Spaun writes the digit it sees in the image. Individual neuron voltage spikes are shown scrolling through the thought bubble at the back of the brain. The decoded value is displayed on top of that activity. The second task is called copy drawing. Instead of just recognizing the digit, the model must reproduce the style of the digit. Here it successfully copies two styles of the number 2. Spaun's representations are thus useful for both categorization and encoding fine perceptual details. The next task is a counting task. This task demonstrates that Spaun can not only represent and categorize numbers, it also has an understanding of numerical concepts like order. Spaun is first shown a number to start counting from, 4, and then it is shown how much to count by, 3. We can see the internal progression of numbers as it counts and finally writes its answer. Next, we have a question answering task. Here, Spaun memorizes a list of numbers and then answers a question about the list. You can watch the topmost working memory as it stores the items in the order they are shown. In this case, Spaun is asked what is in position 5. Spaun answers the question by decoding its working memory and using the result to drive the arm. The final task is a serial working memory task, in which Spaun must memorize a list of items in order and then repeat it back. We have seen several tasks that Spaun performs correctly, but the errors it makes are equally important to determining if it is a good model of human cognition. Note that the darkness of the letter in the thought bubble indicates how well that item can be decoded from the current representation. Spaun is now drawing its memory of the list, but when it gets to the 8, it is no longer confident in its own decoding of that memory, so it draws a horizontal line indicating it has no answer. If we look at the pattern of errors over many versions of Spaun, we will notice that it matches the details of human error patterns. We have now seen half of the tasks that Spaun can perform. The rest are in other videos on the nengo.ca website.
So what are some things that could be improved upon? Well, one is that it's hardwired, so it doesn't have the plasticity and adaptive capabilities of a human brain. Basically, what this means is that it doesn't have the ability to change the strength of a response, so it's kind of an all or nothing. Also, the position of the model, I, is fixed, which means that Spaun can't take in its own input or choose its own input. Whatever is in front of it is what it sees. What makes Spaun different? Well, there is a blue brain project that's another multi-million-dollar project, and it's a large-scale model of a brain. But it cannot see, it can't remember, and it can't control limbs. 3 things that Spaun can do. Smart machines can do things like play chess and backgammon or act as a personal assistant, such as Siri on the iPhone, or Watson, a computer feature you may have seen featured on Jeopardy! But the processes they use have little in common with a human brain. See, these machines can solve problems as efficiently as possible, but they don't actually make connections like the human brain does. So where does this lead to the future? Well, brain simulations might one day be used to better understand and model neurological disorders and diseases. So rather than using a human brain, they can mimic certain diseases and research them and try to find different ways to cure them. One day, though, we might have more human-like machines, and this is quite a topic of controversy with artificial neural networks. We already see that they have the capability to make decisions one day, so you could potentially have a robot that could do something like navigate through a city and deliver a package from one place to another. You also have things like killer robots, which would basically be a robot that would use weapons and make its own decisions on who or what to attack. We already have drones, which is different because a human will control them. But the difference is that with a robot, it makes the decisions on its own. It decides who is a good guy and who's a bad guy and who and what to attack. And that can be dangerous, especially if they develop the functions to turn against us. So that concludes this presentation on Spaun and artificial neural networks.